I want to give you an update on the Volkswagen project. This is a 2.8 liter VR6. This is a 2003 model, and Ian's putting an HX40 turbo on it, which he already has that bolted on. The only thing left is making the downpipe fit, or making a downpipe, I guess, completely, and then recirculating the blow-off valve. If you notice in this video, you'll see that Ian does not have an intercooler, and that's because of YOLO.
So huge.
Actually, I think that he might put an intercooler on there. We're thinking we can do an intercooler where it has the entrance and exit on the same side, and that looks really easy with what we have to work with right now, because it looks like it would work really well with this car. That's everything for the Volkswagen. For my BMW project, I pressure washed my floor mat because it had moss growing on it. And for Ian's BMW project, he realized that the rear seal is leaking, and we probably need to do a clutch in that one anyway to upgrade it for the single turbo kit, which makes sense. I went with the Motive, I think it's called the ST or STS or something. They have several different ones. The one I got is good for 1,000 foot-pounds of torque. I think it was $1,950 for that clutch and flywheel is what I paid for mine. I think Ian probably should go with the same thing, just because it makes sense to have the capability. Either that, or you could step it down to the 800 foot-pound of torque clutch. But either way, you're going to spend a lot of money to get a good quality clutch. You could get, there's one that's not as high, but it's a puck, and I didn't really want the puck disc. I got the street disc, and that one is by, I think it's M-Tech or something. I can't remember, but I felt like that was a pretty good deal. It's like $1,300, supposed to be good for 800 foot-pounds of torque. But I went with the Motive one just because I felt like I wanted the extra capability just in case for later down in the road. A couple other things I got to do recently was I machined my blow-off valve for an O-ring because I never had one. I knew it was leaking because I did a boost leak test. If you haven't seen that video, you should probably go watch it just to learn how to check for air leaks and things like that. Now, I think it's how to use a smoker to detect vacuum leaks. And also, I got a chance to put my fittings on my turbo, and that was all the work that I did for my BMW for this week. Mainly just because I'm trying to catch up on some older turbo projects, so I'm just working really late at night these days, so I can get ahead on those and hopefully get a chance to install my turbo within the month or two and get my car going again. Here's my turbo after I installed the lines. I showed this turbo in an earlier video, so I'm not going to tell exactly everything about it. I put the oil feed in, and I put a 90-degree swivel on it. Of course, I taped these up just so they won't get dirt inside of them. We've got the coolant line installed. We got the blanket installed. I know it probably doesn't look like a lot of work, but it probably took me like 2 or 3 hours just to set this up, even with having the turbo done, because I had to go back and grind some of the bolts to make this blanket be able to fit on here and to work with the hose and everything. See, this coolant line, I have a fitting going downward, and this one is one going out. I'll show you when I do the install why I did that. It'll make a lot more sense. But it's looking pretty good. Now, one thing I want to mention why I didn't use a restrictor. Actually, the feed fitting that I showed you was a restrictor, but I drilled through it. This is the restrictor. So it's supposed to be like 0.035 thousandths. I'm not necessarily against restrictors. I just think that it's unnecessary to have this piece as a restrictor when it's already going through this pin piece, which has a pinhole in it for an oil feed, which is basically a restrictor. So I feel like I'd be putting 2 restrictors on this turbo. This holds the bearing cage in place. So this is directly in the bearing housing, which holds the cage in place. And if that's not there, then you got huge problems, because then the cage can move back and forth and hit up against the housings. Here's the oil feed and the pin that goes in the ball bearing housing. This has a flare on it. It's like a brake line just about, where it's the same concept where it seals up against that without any sealant. And it just has that flare. I guess it's like a 45 or something. Anyway, you're not supposed to use any thread tape or silicone to seal that. I've had multiple people put thread tape on there and it go inside the turbo and absolutely destroy it. I've got one in for repair right now that has that problem. Completely destroyed the whole turbo. Stay tuned if you want to see how this build turns out, and also be subscribed if you want to see how the Volkswagen turns out.